was just programming at that time, not news.
Right.
So he was doing a variety of things.
And he always got home
Looked like he was
about 11:30 because the TV went off at 11:30.
Ah,
Staying up for the national anthem, and then he was home at nights, but he was doing commercials and voiceovers and stuff late at night after that when he got off. So he'd stay till 1, 2, 3 o'clock. Then he did training videos for some different companies. Reynolds Aluminum, he did training videos. He did a voiceover for those, so he did a lot of those.
voice, that's for sure.
Well, he had 4 kids at Catholic school. He had to make a little extra money.
That's right.
Oh, yes.
That's right. Okay. All right. Well, so your father was definitely the pioneer, one of the earliest person that I know of, who graced the airwaves at what is now WSET.
Right.
Tell me about how your father got started here, how that came about. He was in radio, right?
He was in radio when he started, I think, for WABC or WNBC in New York City. And the Allens, I believe, reached out to him. And so he made the move from New York, which thank God he did, and we came to Lynchburg. He started off in radio at first, because his voice, once you heard it, you knew who it was. And he did that for, it's hard to recall back 70 years ago. I think it was about 8 or 10 years maybe. And the station was gradually getting going, and their first radio station was on, if I'm not mistaken, was on Church Street next to City Hall. So when they moved out here, this was a palace, and first thing Lynchburg had seen like this. So he did a number of things other than being a weatherman and doing a Jerry Lewis telethons and a Christmas club and a Cactus Gym Club. But he and Wayne Tyler were the best friends and spent a lot of time doing charity work in the city. But Dad was a weatherman for I don't know, 2 decades maybe, or 3, at 6 and 11, and so.
When news started, because
Right.
news didn't start right when he started here.
Right. He did a lot of specialty shows, and TV wasn't on 24 hours a day either. But he was so well known in town. Everybody acted like they knew him or said they knew him. Well, I know your dad. Well, you watched him on TV, but did you ever meet him? And a lot of people did, because he did a tremendous amount of charity work in Lynchburg. And he instilled it in all the kids. And so it was fun growing up in town where everybody knew your name. And the one thing he told us all, don't ever embarrass me in this town. And none of us managed to do that we know of. that we know of.
Well, I mean, you became a fine officer for the city of Lynchburg. Certainly that made him very proud.
Well, and he was very thankful because he had 4 kids that were going to be in college at the same time. And there were funds available back in the early 70s to pay for our college. And so I went the route to get my college paid for and let him off the hook, and I ended up liking it and staying for a couple decades. But it was worthwhile and very, very fun, and he was very proud of what I did, and I'm proud of what I did, and I had a very successful career. Enjoyed it much. Lynchburg been very good to me.
When you retired, what was your position? Were you an investigator?
No, I was the evening shift commander.
Okay.
After I got back from the FBI Academy, I was in personnel and training, and I did a little bit of everything over the years. Yeah. But uniform was still my favorite.
Yeah. Tell me about some of your father's earlier shows. If you can name some of them.
He did one called the Cactus Gym Show, where he dressed up as a cowboy and had kids in and told stories, and there were some other shows similar in other venues that I had seen. There was a Cactus Joe, I think maybe in Roanoke or west of here, and I believe it was Schul's had a Christmas toy where we had to bring our friends in and play with all the new toys that they'd show on TV, and then thinking the parents would run right out and get them. So that was a big one. And Kitty College was probably one of the biggest shows that they ever did here. Had 3rd graders from surrounding counties, schools, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, and very, very, very popular. That's where most people knew him from, and he was an MC on that. And I think he did it every Thursday night, if I recall. But yeah, that went on for years and years, and that was a big one. And then the WLVA Christmas party, he and Wayne Tyler, we spoke about that. They had local talent, such as it was at the time, would come in and sing and call groups, and people would call in donations, and then we'd be in cars, we'd ride out to the houses and pick up the money as they were collecting it. So they made several $1,000s a year back in the days.
For who? For charity?
I believe it was a Salvation Army had something to do with feeding everybody during the holiday season. But he and Wayne Tyler did that for at least 15 or 20 years. And then he got into the Jerry Lewis Telethon. And I had a good time going to Las Vegas with him for training. But he did that for years and years and years and years. It's hard to know exactly. Some of it ran together, but he stayed busy both professionally and civically in the Knights of Columbus and the local churches and raising money for every charity you can think of. So he was hands-on and not hands-out.
Yeah. I've seen clips of him dressed up in funny costumes announcing movies, I think?
He was on a Johnny Carson show one night, and his sense of humor was crazy. And they had a contest for the silliest name in the crowd. And Ed McMahon called on him to stand up. And he told him his name was Clyde Fendel Hesse. Made it up on the run, and Johnny Carson about fell out of his chair. I forget what he won, but he had the goofiest name in the audience that night. So he would dress up during the weather, silly stuff. But he liked it. He was an actor, a dad, a weatherman, but he enjoyed cutting up. And the people liked it. Back in the day, that's where there wasn't all these TV shows on now, all the entertainment. So there was as much, not slapstick, but between him and Charles Middleton, everybody got a big dose of comedy on the weather and the local TV channel. They were big cut-ups.
Yeah. He would introduce movies and talk.
He did, when movies would come to the theaters, he did short bits, how they got them back in the day, of the reel-to-reel tapes, but he'd do some voiceovers and introduce and let people know what was at the movie theaters.
Oh, I thought he was introducing movies that were about to come on.
Oh, he did that here too, but he'd come on and stand there and tell you what was going to be going on, not what was going to happen, but introduce the movies here. But he did them for the Plaza Theater and a Warner and the Paramount Theater down on Main Street, downtown. So he'd do little clips, 30 seconds maybe, just to give. It's a drawing card, and I don't know what he got paid for it, but he did a bunch of them.
Yeah.
So.
And then the Silver Dollar Dance Show?
Dr. Pepper Silver Dollar Dance Club. I forgot all about that. That was in my formative years, and I wasn't involved in that. I remember hearing it and seeing some signs for it over the years, but I believe they had local teens at the time come in and they had little dance contests in here, probably in the Saddle Oxfords and drinking Dr. Peppers, I suppose. But I never got to see that one, but I heard about it. And there was a few more that I can't quite recall, but they were done in the early 60s, and I don't remember exactly what year y'all turned the cameras on.
53.
Whoa, okay.
Yeah.
So I don't remember, I don't quite remember all of them, but I remember, 'cause I went to school right down the street. So we would walk up here after school and sports practice and wait on Dad to get off at 6:30 from the news. And there were several nights when I got here and the cameras were quite a lot bigger than what you have now. And so we assisted with the cameras, my brother and I. Not often, but several times we were pressed into service doing it. And it was kind of fun. We thought we were somebody.
Yeah.
So it was fun.
Yeah, I imagine you spent a lot of time here as a kid.
Through junior achievement, doing a radio show. Some of the folks that had working here, Charlie Gibson for one, he was real nice to us, very nice. He lived with us, actually.
Tell me a little bit more about that.
He lived with us over in Fort Hill while I can't remember where he came from. and it's before he was married. He wasn't quite married yet. And so we've had several on-air reporters live with us. So Dad took them under his wing, and I think Charlie lived with us for, I don't know, 3 or 4 years anyway. And he left the morning show early, chartered a plane and flew to Lynchburg for Dad's funeral. So it was, they had quite a bond. So he could call him, and he'd go up to the Good Morning America show with Charlie from time to time. So he knew a lot of people in a lot of places over the years. Yeah, sure did.
Yeah. Were you ever on Kitty College yourself, or you couldn't be?
I think somebody would have cried foul, and I won't say that my grades were good enough to be selected for it. They probably were, but I can't really remember. But they took the cream of the crop. My sister was a scorekeeper before Jenny Smith back in the day. When I was here for most of the nights, they did it and sat in here. But no, I never had the distinct honor to be a seated panelist. But enjoyed it. A lot of my friends were. And I talked to a lady today. I was trying to find the spinner board. It was a probably 2-foot diameter board with wooden pegs in it and a flapper, kind of like the Price is Right, or
a small version of
the Wheel of Fortune. And I tracked it. It was in up near Richmond for over 30 years. Then the school teacher retired and gave it to another teacher in Dillwyn, Virginia, at the Christian school there. And she used it for 7 or 8 years. And then she passed it along, and teacher after teacher after teacher used it. And it's somewhere between, it's in a closet, we can't find it today, or it got rickety after 50, 60 years and fell apart. But it was amazing how the search went to find it.
And no one knows how it got
And
to
the principal of the school, when I told her my name, she says, "What's your name?" She says, "I remember," she called Dad James. I said, "No, well, you probably knew him back then by Jim." She said, "I was on Kitty College twice, through Buckingham Primary and her Brownie troop. And the school won, the Brownie troop didn't. But she remembered everything he did, said, coming over here. It was unbelievable. And it's been a long time ago, 50 years ago probably. Yeah, 50, more than 50. Yeah. So I don't remember what year exactly it started, but judging by my age and what I remember, it was at least 50 years ago. Yeah. And she remembered. So that was pretty special.
A lot of people were on that. Michelle Wright was on it.
Was she? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then I don't know if Jenny was on it. I know she did help do.
Her father was a local dentist, and she was in junior achievement with us, a very pleasant girl. And so she spun the wheel, and then she'd tell the scores and write them down in chalk on the front. and at the end of each round, she'd change the score on there and kept up with the math. But yeah, she knew a lot of people in town, but she was in junior achievement with us. She's very, very talented. And she went on to a network career.
She went to Sacramento for a long time.
Right, right.
So you what are your fondest memories about your dad, his antics?
You know, back in the day, Kmart was we didn't have everything we have now. If we went to Kmart to pick up one item, we'd be there for 2 hours because every 10 feet he would stop and talk, stop and talk, stop and talk, and laugh and carry on. And we were impatient and didn't understand what was really going on. But that was a highlight of his day. He loved the people, and he took us to charity events with him, and we sold candy canes. We collected money for the Salvation Army with him, and he never shied away from anything. And to see the respect that people had for him and how good he was to people, that was a cool part. He taught me a lot of life lessons. I've tried to follow a bunch of them. Some I couldn't. Most of them I did, and it kept me in good stead just trying to, what would Dad say? And my brothers and sisters have done the same thing. So very proud of what he taught us and tried to not sully his name or everything that he tried to create in Lynchburg here.
Mm-hmm. You've watched this station for all these years. since you can remember watching TV as a kid.
Right.
What do you think of how it has transformed over these last at least 50 years?
Obviously, in a market the size of Lynchburg, notwithstanding some of you folks that have been here for a little while, it seems to be that y'all mentor some of these younger folks and kids and then pat them on the head and they move on to Richmond or they move on to Virginia Beach. And they don't have, I don't think they have real ties to start with here with a bunch of families, so they're on the move for bigger and better things. Those of us close to my age, you get roots here, and this is where I'm staying. But y'all do a wonderful job teaching these folks, and a few stick around. And I was talking to Dennis Carter last night. He's one of the old school ones that came and stayed. So I've made friends with a lot of them over the years. I remember you very well, even though I've been retired for a while. You came several years ago. But even the maintenance man here treated us like his kid, Curtis Turner. And if it was raining, he'd come down to school and pick us up and bring us back up here in his own car, so we didn't have to walk. So the staff up here, everybody from Charles Sprague, Charlie Gibson, all the staff in here, they were all like I had 100 parents. So that was a big thing. We were welcome here anytime and treated like gold, more so probably than we should have been as kids. But they respected us, treated us great. So it was like a huge family. So it's been something I've never forgotten up here, never.
Looks quite different from the old days you used to be in this building. I don't think this part was here initially. I think it stopped.
I think that wall there stopped it.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just elaborate. The lights weren't like this, and everything was on rollers, and they'd roll it out for this and roll it back for that. But it was pretty small. None of these satellite dishes were here back in the day. But yeah, things have changed a lot, and the equipment's gotten so much smaller. The lights were so bright you almost needed sunglasses. The cameras were so big you held about 2 hands and had to, stand on an apple crate. We did as kids, stand on a box so we could see down through the cameras. Now everything is completely different. But the floor was covered in wires. But this is state of the art, which I'll have going on here now. This is impressive for Lynchburg.
Yeah, and like the little tiny microphone that you have now on your lapel. I mean, they were huge back then.
They were, and they weren't very mobile. And they're trying to read papers and move papers around behind them while they're trying to read. And the cable on them were huge when they put that stuff on. And I'm sure it was a hindrance. And they didn't have the mobility that y'all have now, walking around. And I see the weatherman there spinning left and right and pointing. With all that back in the day, it was almost like you were sliding forwards and backwards. And now you've got green screens. And if you're in here and you see them, there's nothing there.
Right.
But people at home see them and think that's what they're pointing at. And they're looking at this and pointing at that. And so the technology, I've seen it come round and round over the years.
Yeah.
So it's been quite the change.
Because when your dad was doing weather, what would he have to do?
Well, the first thing he did was call the guy at the airport. I cannot remember his name to save my life. I've met him, but I can't remember his name. But that's where he got his initial information. And I want to say they were more reporters than they weren't necessarily meteorologists. And I could probably guess who the first technical meteorologist was that actually went to school for it. But he'd call people, in the surrounding states, and they all knew each other, and they'd call here, and how they knew, and they had magic markers. Everything was, they draw the fronts and the snow and the rain and the temperature. Nothing was automated like it is now.
Right.
But he had.
I was wondering, what did they have to do?
Oh, I can remember it was a half crescent circle with a bunch of spikes on it where the front was coming, and the line would curve which way the front was coming directionally. And rain, he'd write rain on there, or R, or a hot, or cold. So it was really very, very basic. But he had people that he would call, and it was a prediction. It was, it wasn't really a forecast. It was prediction. He'd jumble everything up he was told, and he'd start on it maybe at 4 o'clock, and then at 6 he'd do the weather, and then he'd come back to the station at 10 and try and fine tune it. He was right more than he was wrong, but
Just by pure luck.
well, some of it was by luck, and then I don't know how to clarify it other than. But a lot was luck. A lot was. But the gentleman at the airport, and I wish I could, in respect to him, could remember his name. But he was Dad's go-to dude at the National Weather Service out there, and very helpful. But he was really fond of him, and that's what got him going, because he gave him a microphone and a magic marker and said, "Now you're the weatherman." So, you know, it's an awful spot to be put in. He liked it, but I don't know that I would have thrived like he did doing that. No, I don't think so.
Do you know how your dad felt about the transition from radio to TV?
He was excited about it. I remember, because he had to dress different, coat and tie, and everything got tightened up a little bit. And once people, well, they heard his voice on the radio, as I recall, some people didn't put a face to it. Then you hear the radio, but when it started being more visual, and we all went to Catholic school. We wore saddle Oxfords and iron pants and bow ties at school. So we were already dressed correctly, but he made sure of it, and not to embarrass him, and uphold what he's trying to do here. And he dressed all the time. He almost wore a tie on Saturdays. And he was into it, and he enjoyed it. Yeah, and if he went shopping, he didn't. I'm not sure if he ever owned a pair of shorts. I might have seen him in a bathing suit one time, maybe at Isaac Walton. I'm not sure about that, but no, he was very professional. Very. He was a minister of the Eucharist in Holy Cross Church. Gave out communion, and that's one notch below the priest. That's very high honor, and he was very proud of it. But so that's one of the things he volunteered in. So he did a number of things, but he kept his attire tight.
Did he have some theatrical background? Because he was not at all shy once he was behind the camera and went on the camera.
He did some things at the Fine Arts Center, and I'm not so sure, it was before my time, downtown at the Academy, maybe something down there, but I don't. That was way before me.
He was just a natural clown.
Yes, and an audience, and he could remember every punchline and delivered them perfectly. I can't remember the joke, or I forget the punchline by the time I've told a joke. His timing was good, and he was quick-witted. And he could. He didn't want to. He always said, you can mess up in life, but don't ever say something that you know isn't true. Don't ever tell me something that isn't true, because if I go to bat for you, he said, that way I don't have to worry about it. I'll go to bat for you. If you tell me something's wrong, I'll go to bat for you. But don't ever make me question what you're telling me. And so I did my best to never do that. So I saw my sisters, what happened. So I'm kidding. But no, he was a better dad than anybody could ask for. Absolutely. Miss him every day. As a matter of fact, I was at the police memorial in Washington, D.C., and cell phones were just coming out back in '99. And Colonel Bennett, he had a cell phone. He was special. I didn't have one yet. But the nursing home went through the police department and was able to send a message to Colonel Bennett's phone when Mariah Carey was singing, and they gave the out-of-service code while she was singing the police tribute song with that light. And that's when he passed away, right in the middle of the police service when we were standing in front of the White House up there in Washington, D.C.
Wow.
So he exited as proudly, and he was a fighter, both in the war as a pilot and in the later years when he was ill. But it was a pretty special moment, because I was watching Mariah Carey, and he held up the phone and showed me. And I told him ahead of time I'll probably get a message, or he'd get a message. So he did. He showed it to me. It said 10:42, which meant he was out of service. He was gone. So anyway.
When was that? 1990? 1999.
I believe it was 99.
Yeah.
Caught me off guard a little bit. I believe it was 99.
Yeah. Wow.
So 23 years ago, 24.
Wow. Any particular other stories that you care to share about life at the TV station back in your dad's days?
When other people were reading the weather, or doing a newscast. I heard of this. I didn't see it, so I'm only passing along what I was told. He would get behind the cameraman, and back then there weren't a lot of females involved in this. So he would do antics behind the cameraman to try and break up the guys while they're reading, and he walks in with his loafers and no pants on, you know, that kind of stuff. Not for the public, but to mess up the anchors in here. And
was it successful?
yes, there were several that I've seen them before. Just put their head down and shake it. And I think originally they were taping some. I'm not sure every bit of it was live. I can't recall, but something tells me that some of it was taped. And they just put their head down and re-rack everything and start over again. But you know, I think that was part of his trying to train them. So, you know, things happen. Stuff falls off, stuff breaks. Your attention, I've seen the weatherman. His board goes dark.
Right.
Well, what happens when you lose your crutch? You have to be able to continue on. And I think while him being silly, I think it was part of his way of training them and getting them to, you know, loosen up a little bit and not be so rigid. But yeah, he was a jokester, and we fool around with these guys and gals in later years. But they loved them all, and things changed. You know, technology was changing, and then he went into sales right before he got sick and retired for good. But he loved the sales too. Everybody knew him, and he could sell ice to an Eskimo. And so he got into that line of work for 2 or 3 years, and then we were all out of college and on our own, and he said, I'm done. So the timing was very good. So he helped me with my son and great-grandfather and friend. That's a big thing, he's a friend.
I wish I had known him longer, and I've met him, but
he was way cool, and he was a social butterfly.
Yeah.
Him and Charles Middleton.
Yeah. What do you know about Charles Middleton?
He was in the Navy. He was a naval meteorologist. And I don't know if he directed fighter planes or he tried to figure out what the weather was going to be down at North Newport News Shipbuilding in Dry Dock. I don't know. But Charles liked to imbibe.
That's what I've heard.
Oh.
That he was drunk on air a lot.
Charles would stammer, and Dad would bring him home because Charles had a house up on Lakeside Drive for a while. And Charles would come out of the house and come up and stagger up the door and come in. And Dad would take him and find him a room, and because my sisters had moved out then, I believe, and would sleep off Charles. And many a night, Dad came back and did the news because Charles was under the weather. But Charles he was retired military when he came here. And he was affable and everybody liked him.
Yeah.
But there's still jokes to this day.
Oh, I know. I've heard
about
stumbling off the screen during the newscast.
About Charles Middleton, you know, and dropping pointers, and, you know, they had pointers with rubber tips on them back in the day. And that's how they used to point at stuff. I remember it exactly. But Charles was had some high mileage on him when he got here. Mm-hmm. And as I recall, Dad took him under his wing as best he could. Protected him when he should and could, and tried to when he couldn't. But he was very loyal to all these guys. And I think that's one of the reasons why Charlie Gibson chartered a plane and came down here for that. And left at the first break in Good Morning America. And Charlie had to leave. And wow, for him to get off of that
means a
and
lot.
pay for an airplane to flew into Fall Aviation. Matter of fact. So I remember it because 2 policemen went over and picked him up. Pelletier and Balmer, who were doing that police show over here.
Yeah, Hill City Blues.
They went over and picked him up at the airport. I sent him over there. Absolutely remember it. So quite a day. I was very honored. Actually, he'd come for the funeral. He came a couple of days before he passed away. But Dad knew that Charlie was here, and they spoke. So it wasn't but he said, let us know before it, you know, and I'll be there. And my sister Linda called him the day before and said, you know, maybe tonight or tomorrow. So he flew in the next morning. And
So he got to see your dad alive?
yes, and they talked. And Dad knew he was here.
Wow.
Yep. And Dad was on a lot of morphines and probably a bourbon drip. And he was listening to the Ave Maria music and the songs and headphones we got him. So he was chilled out.
Yeah.
But oh yes, he absolutely.
That's amazing.
As a matter of fact, I think I could find it, but they got him in a wheelchair and Charlie was standing there next to him, his hand on his shoulder. My dad had his lid on and looking at Charlie. So yes, this was in the last, I'd say, week or a couple days. I think Dad still managed to hold on a couple days longer than what they thought right at the very, very end.
Right.
But yeah, Charlie was, it was very special for my family that he came down. But he lived with us and he knew us as little kids.
Right.
So my mom was very grateful, although she was, dementia was setting in. But no. But that, Charlie remembered her and obviously, and she pretty much remembered him. But he was very gracious, nice guy, and was here for 6 or 8 hours, and then got back on his airplane. And the next morning, he was back home.
Wow.
Good Morning America in New York City. So that gave me a little clue on what esteem he. And I don't really know what part, if any, Dad played in him getting hired here. I don't know about that. I got my thoughts, but I don't know. But he took him under his wing when he was here. So they formed a good relationship, and Charlie played softball. Dad played softball too. And Charlie Gibson played on a local softball team in the evenings, or he'd see glass on the field. So yeah, it was a good time growing up.
Yeah.
No regrets.
Bet it was.
None.
What can you tell me about this? You just
I ran into some memorabilia over the years. Some I gave to other personalities that worked here. And I found this from the original radio station from back in the 50s. There was a microphone that fit in it, and I remember Walter Cronkite and them sitting in front of these with
their call letters.
yeah, and I hung this on a hook in my garage years ago, and a couple nights ago, and I thought about it about 6 months ago, and then I put something over top of it and covered it up again. Well, 2 nights ago, and after we spoke, I thought about it. I went back looking for it, and I found it. Dad was very fond of you, and I've got some other things, but that I never knew if they were going to have a little museum or showcase or something over here. I guess I was thinking they might one day, but that I doubt there's another one. I don't think there is, but I'd appreciate if you would take it, and he'd be tickled to death for you to have it,
Well,
because
thank you.
he spoke to you very kindly. He thought a lot of you.
And I'm honored.
Well, good.
And I hope that they do make a museum, because
There were some other pieces. He gave some microphones, some of the old style microphones, to some of the other newscasters and people that were here, some memorabilia that he wasn't going to be needing. I remember we had probably 10,000, conservatively, albums and 45s, because in the day they would send the big records in here for them to play and get airtime so that people could sell records. It was advertisement. So they'd send them to them, and all the new 45s,
for the when he
stacks,
was on radio.
stacks and stacks and stacks. We had cases, a wall full. So he brought them home. Every Perry Como, Benny Goodman and all the Elvis.
Where did those go?
We give a lot of them to his friends.
Okay.
And
I mean, they didn't get tossed out.
no. And when Mom got ill and she moved out, we had to do some stuff with them. But we didn't sell or make a dime off any of them. They were given to some of his older friends down at the Holy Cross Church, anybody that wanted them, and we labeled them all, had them in order, but they stayed in cardboard cases, and you could play every one of them. Some of the people didn't have anything to play them on,
Right.
but to be able to have it, and it had not for sale stamped in each of them, so you knew it came to, obviously it came to the radio station as a promo.
Yeah.
Thousands. And some of the Elvis ones were probably worth some money, but they were all donated to the church, the Holy Cross Church, and whatever they made off of them.
Right. Yeah.
But at one time, my mom was going to throw them out. She wanted to clean up everything, get rid of it.
Yeah.
So my sister stepped in and said, no, 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 no.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we donated them, I guess is a bit the right word,
Yeah.
and gave them away to people that would enjoy them.
Yeah.
And that was pretty cool. There was probably 1,000 of the 45s and probably 8,000 or 10,000 of the, literally, of the big ones. And I don't know what they'd be worth today, but people were happy to get them
Yeah.
when we did it.
Yeah.
So I don't even have anything that would play them anymore. But they went to good causes and people enjoyed them. So that was, we enjoyed it.
That's really neat.
Yes.
Well, thank you. Did you get shots from back there and everything? Yeah. So.
All right, no problem. If a few other trinkets, and there is a stand, I don't know where it's at,
Right.
that the microphone sat in, and it weighs about 4 pounds. If you dropped it on your toes, it'd break all your toes.
Oh.
It was heavy on a weighted, very weighted. I don't know that it had sand in it. It was probably lead, but that's somewhere, and I don't know where. I'll run up on it, and I do have the studio silence signs that were
Yeah.
that sat out in a hall out there. So when you came down, you didn't bust the door open and come in talking while
Yeah.
he's sitting here reading the news. And it was
Over there somewhere.
went for the back door that went out in the back parking lot from.
Yeah, that's around the corner. That's on the other side of this wall.
Okay, yeah, there was a little vestibule, as I recall, when you stepped in, and the light was on there too. So if you came in the back door, you didn't interrupt anything.
Yeah.
Let them know that we're making our money. Be quiet.
Yeah,
So-
right,
so,
right.
Yeah.
It's funny.
Well, thanks, Noreen. I appreciate
Thank
it. And
you. It's great.
I didn't realize, golly, time has really flown. Holy crap.